A story about Joseph Kingman, a true force brought forward by the basic human intelligence to survive and the nature to question and oppose the ideologies of those who claim sanity. Joseph was a small boy growing up in a cottage on a farm on the outskirts of a town where only small things happened, predictable like clockwork. The small number of people who occupy this town remain in their routines and rarely think of anything outside of their own town's existence. Joseph's father is an antique rescue and restoration man.
You know, he fixes the broken things, he finds the problem, repairs it by gluing the stuff up, and sells it or gives it back.
Joseph would always have to explain. His mother liked baking pies, but never ate any of them.
Sure do love the smell of those pies, princess.
Joseph started imitating his father. The pies were always perfect, all sorts of flavors. Some loved and others loathed. For instance, lamb's brains gravy was always a winner. However, pumpkin surprise was always frightfully dreaded for its surprise. Collecting currants for dessert pie was one of Joseph's favorite jobs. He always ate as many as he could, collecting them. On arriving back to the house with the currants filled to the brim with the basket he carried, Joseph's mother would always thank him with a smile and giggle, saying, "Thank you, Count Dracula. I'm forever your humble servant." Joseph didn't learn about Count Dracula until later on in life, when he did finally realize the joke his mother had always insisted on repeating every time he collected the currants for the pie, the laughter's bellows and echoes of the punchline that long lived. As a child, the dark red and purple currant juice had been staining his lips and chin for days. Although Joseph had many animals on the farm, like cows and chickens and horses and the lone fox every now and then, none of them were ever pets. There were more animals than Joseph could care for alone. None of them were ever cared for like pets. They were all cared for as stock, work animals, breeding, for eating, so pets were almost foreign to Joseph. Joseph remembered in a trail of thought trying to explain a pet to his mother.
You know, a pet is one of those fluffy things and you love and you hug and you kiss and all that. I never had a pet, and then I guess I think I would like that. I'll call it Calvin and it could lay on my bed at night.
A trail of thought Joseph expressed to his mother. And by a twist of fate, Calvin came in. It does not matter of his origin story, nor it matters of his faith, as such as others long rested by the pine trees. There were many animals called pets in the years to come. Joseph did not want another one. A few months passed, and Joseph was asked to join his parents in the living room, where Joseph was informed that his mother was pregnant and they would soon be celebrating the birth of a baby sister. A quick few months passed, and Cohen, blue eyes and white to the world. With her first birthday, another fluffy pet joined the family, but shortly after would meet its demise, buried under the pine trees and eaten by the earth, and will be gone, like those before and like those after. You see, it's not sinister, but those dogs, cats, mice, and guinea pigs have all met a natural demise by land and nature and water, and fever and natural disaster. None of them have lasted forever, ever.
Dad, the perspex lid on a guinea pig's cage is really warm. It was in the sun all day and roasting out there, and I've had a quick look, but all I could see were fluff balls.
Joseph later explained the fluff balls to his father.
Well, they're gone.
His father stated bluntly. Joseph built the stained memories of which each loved pet met its demise by natural causes and events. All of this had become humorous to Joseph. Joseph had a curiosity growing inside him and began contemplating the coincidental reflections that fueled the spontaneous deaths.
Dad, Madison had 4 pups, and now I can only see 3. Where is the third?
A loud crunch comes from the corner of the dog's shed, staining the brain with an image to never forget. Madison had ate her own newborn puppy. Over the next few weeks, she continued to eat random items and the behavior excelled anything healthy. The dog was beginning to eat her own shit. She was put to rest due to thick venom poisoning her brain. Chapter 2. Who are you? You are who? A gift is always welcomed when the gift is given by those admired, affirmed a bond, a connection, a timeless thought, imprinting a permanent moment of admiration. For Joseph, this was when his father invited him to the workshop, the barn full of antique furniture, half-repaired parts, stashed and stored like a jungle of puzzles waiting to be assembled, fixed, and put back together, restored for a second life, limbs of a table made to a chandelier now hanging from the roof and spinning on what was once a wagon wheel. His father led him to the workshop table, and on the table, an item, the item covered with a red cloth stained in pine oils. His father dramatically builds up anticipation ever so slowly, removing the cloth to reveal, through the reflective shimmering of the sunlight pouring through the window, Joseph's blurring eyes come clear, rubbing his eyes to make focus to see a lime green box reading the label Boston, and below 200 FM radio. The shiny silver knobs for tuning, wide range of station selection, the long-range antenna pulled to its tallest peak. Joseph was in a moment of shock, joy, and excitement. Joseph took a moment to thank his father and asked, "Father, is this an early gift for my birthday?" His father replied in a cracked voice, clearing his throat. His father's brittle attempt at saying "I love you," but Joseph understood. Joseph's father continued to say, hugging Joseph from head to chest with a pat on the head. And now Joseph was set on his way, heading back to his room to power up his Boston 200 FM radio. He began tuning through the festivities of jazz music, tuning through and hearing for the first time classical guitar, violins, trumpets, voices of enlightened wonders. Unheard before, like spice, sounds flooded the ears with warmth, ruminating down the spine, meeting the sounds of bass on the floor as the frequency merged with his heartbeat. Adrenaline flooded the brain, a natural dopamine high, releasing the undeniable edge to dance when never danced before. Of all the new sounds to be heard, it was a voice that emerged from the tradition of static gestation, a voice that at first could be mistaken for a vibrant advertisement campaign meant for an audience of military personnel, a voice crisp, deep in sound, but with an upbeat tone that seemed positive and irritatingly likable. As he spoke with a classic edge, the words danced and rolled off the tongue, as if every word was premeditated and practiced to perfection. The voice in the radio was soon known to be Leroy Harvey, a professor of historical education and a hobbyist of herbal medicine. As the professor introduced himself through the radio, Joseph listened with content, and all other sounds faded away into the distance. Professor Leroy spoke of many adventures, tales of discovery, cures and ailments from foreign places and foreign lands where only the dearest men traveled. Joseph listened, dreaming of the same discoveries and adventures beyond a small farm in a small town. Learning and listening was his escape of all the admirations. It was Leroy's voice Joseph was listening to, admiring a sense of optimism in each phrase, growing, creating an image of a tall man, well-spoken in every word, neat facial hair and a top hat to match. To imagine a way he would move, to pronounce the sounds of each word with his body in the way Leroy would, to travel beyond the fragile town walls like Leroy would, to interact with the world presenting only as Leroy would. Who are you? I am you. Joseph's desire to imitate grows intensely, practicing each word, each movement premeditated and presented upbeat, spinning a positive light into every word, every single gesture, even if the conversation was doom and gloom. The punctuality expressed would express the emotional intelligence of a person beyond their own years. And now practiced and perfected. Who am I? A personality that needed a name. This couldn't be Joseph. It's just not him. A new name for a new face, a name born from natural character. Pausing for a moment. Hello, Joe. Joseph greeting himself in the reflection of the bedroom window. Joe was a name that seemed simple enough. Joseph went to work building on an outfit for his new personality and alter ego, Joe. Of course, his mother was happy to help him when he asked for materials to make a mini tuxedo. Helen asked, "Why a mini tuxedo?" Joseph replies in a cool, calm voice, "So I could look good." Without further questions, Helen begins shaping and forming a mini tuxedo with a complementary vest. The old paper design lays spread out as the materials are cut from old curtains, the material that his father Mark had brought from the markets only weeks ago. Helen now donating to her son's expression, cuts and weaves and saws and shreds and reforms. When Joseph's father came in to see the carnage, Helen stated in a giggling voice, "Don't worry, dear. Those dreadful curtains were never going to hang from these walls." Helen and Joseph giggle in a memorable moment. Mark pauses and slowly turns around and creeps his way out of the room. This infested the giggles to become hysterical laughter. They both roll around on the floor holding their bellies for what seemed to be an eternity. Finally, after hours, Helen had finally finished. She made a reversible dark tone green jacket with a deep purple lining the inside, purple slacks with matching braces sewed to the seam. The white boot covers gave a sense of gangsta. However, the complementing vest gave an image of sophistication. It was fashion perfection. Joseph's arm slid into each sleeve. The sensation of the material on his skin was transforming. Each leg glided into position, representing an ascension. Each button closed confirmed the perfection of the outfit. Parading the awesome tuxedo his mother had made, Joseph made his way to the mirror that was fixed to the living room wall. Staring for a moment, with his head tilted, the reflection reminded him of himself, Joseph. Joseph decided that this face was not his face. It was not the face of Joe. He had to make a way for his alter ego, Joe, and Joe would need a face. Being a supportive mother of four, Helen was happy to play along. She provided a powder patch and mascara, and seeing Joseph apply it to himself was humorous to Helen as she watched on. Joseph, now as Joe, presented himself to Helen in a flare. The black patchy eyes, pale white thick powder, green eyebrows and touch of rose on the cheeks. The surprised turnaround jump-scared Helen and caused a hiccup laugh that she had to swallow quickly to save any embarrassment. The fully formed Joe, now and forever, shining brightly in his glory. Joe turns to Helen, greeting her for the first time in a spontaneous personality. "Hello there, Helen. I hear you've been good to me, with cups of love and plates of hugs, keeping away those nasty bedbugs." The fashion and form of Joe, as twisted and turned, was distorted and deliberate. He started with each word as if he plucked it from the air with his fingertips. Premeditated words blend with movements as he awaits her reply. Proud and happy, Helen reciprocates. Helen directed Joe to, "Go show your father." So he does, making his way to the shed, Joe now knocking on the workshop doors filled with anticipation of his father's reaction. "Tappity tap tap," Joe said with flair.
Yeah, come through.
Mark was sitting at his workbench. As Joe approached, the smell of stain filled the air, and Mark turned.
Wow, hello you.
Mark welcomes Joe. "Hello, Mark. How's the work?" asked Joe.
Good, but I do have to ask, who do we have here? I never seen this one before.
Mark leans over to ask,
Who are you?
as he plays along to the show and tell performance. "Joe," with a close reply.
Joe.
His father repeated, "That is me. Now you see, this is me, happy like a buzzing bee." Joe expelled in a confined space of the workshop. Mark chuckled and asked if he could add to this perfect disaster, and turned to the workstation, grabbing a paintbrush from a tin of some sort, tapping off the excess residue. Mark, wanting to join in the fun, said,
Happy hey, let's put a smile on that face.
Joe excitedly agrees, placing one hand on Joe's head. Paintbrush runs ear to ear, as if being dubbed with enlightenment and independence by the sword. This statement created an outrageous smile that perfectly aligned with the egotistical values of the newly formed personality, now truly a Kingman, a celebration of what was Joe's first initiation ceremony. The thick, oily brush gives a cold sensation as the liquid is smeared over the lips, feeling every bristle as it glides from one mouth edge to his outer cheekbone and coming back again, covering both sides with an oily black paint.
Now, who are you?
Mark asks Joe. Joe, he replies. Mark corrects Joe, saying,
You're Joe Kingman.
Joe Kingman, rippled and repeated. Joe Kingman, Joe Kingman, Joe Kingman, Joe Kingman, the name Joe Kingman resonating, repeating throughout space and time forever. For the name Joe Kingman is a name that will change a future, creating a culture and drive freedom and revolution to the limits, a legacy unchallenged and unforgiving, idealized and memorable moments to be obsessed by all his people and feared by those who oppose the obsession. Joe had worn his tuxedo and matching accessories for 3 days straight, and was advised by Helen to wash and change. This turned into a demand, and the demand must be performed immediately. Joseph had returned. In the following days, Joseph dreamed of being Joe Kingman again. What he would do, who he would see, what the future will hold, how to represent Joe as his small world dramatically expands and develops new thoughts and ideas. How nature will develop the demand of natural selection and sacrifice, how to survive, to become consciously evolving and live free as nature wants us to be. One day, like all the other days, Joseph's father was out on a market hunt. Turning his trade as he often said, his mother was preoccupied with the twins, Nadine and Dominic. Joseph thought this to be the perfect time to visit Joe Kingman. Visit was the term that came to be known for the changeover in the institutions Joseph would reside in for years to come. Same as he prepared in recent events, the tuxedo slipped on, face makeup applied, and Joseph went on a hunt for the final phase of the transformation ceremony, finding his way through Dad's workshop in a dim light fluttering through the window. Finally finding the paintbrush as he used before, smearing the oily residue from inner mouth edge to the outer cheekbone, the oily residue painted a smile from cheek to cheek. Joe paused, stepped forward into the light. The oil instantly began burning, blistering, and bubbling. It was not oil. He had not seen what his father applied previously and assumed it was the same substance. However, regrettably, it was not. It was a chemical called euphonic acid, a powerful and effective paint stripper. Joe's face burnt like fire. The acid fizzling, squalls of pain bellow out, the stretching of the skin breaking and detaching as if melting to the bone on both sides of his face. The expression of horror fills every cell, pumping hot blood throughout the nervous system. A permanent smile had found its way to Joe's face. In a state of panic, he tried scratching and rubbing his face with his fingers, trying to rub away the intoxicating pain of acid. The acid spreads to his fingertips, melting away the top layers of flesh. With one last breath, Joe screamed out in tormented pain. The acid blistered and bubbled, exposing raw flesh from inner mouth edge to the outer cheek as he screamed. The cracked trails of white and black makeup seeped into chemical compounds that leaked down the edges into the exposed flesh, now permanently embedded. Mixing with pre-applications of the powder foundation, the color seeped into the carnage and damaged the tissue and raw flesh. This would be the final phase that is buried into the minds of millions and feeds on the souls infested with fear. Helen, hearing the cries, ran into the workshop, knocking shelves, slumbering over bits and pieces, leaping forward in a race to get to her son laying on the floor, coming closer and seeing carnage. Helen felt faint after screaming in shock, falling to the floor, and her arms knocked the table, causing everything to fall in all directions, tipping the very same acid tin over. The entire tin spilling over the bench. The liquid moves like lava, making its way to the edge of the bench, just above where Helen lay. The acid dribbled off the bench, landing next to Helen's face on the floor, the acid splashing. The fiery liquid sprayed the side of Helen's face in a violent mass, hitting her ear, melting away flesh, hair, half of Helen's face mutated, blistering, with gestating pain, the acid making its way through the inner ear, the blood cells flushing the spread of the acid, scorching the brain, burning fundamental fragments of humanity from Helen's fragile mind. Helen could only inhale air as she threw back her head in pain, twisted, bent, frozen in pain. The fear forced every muscle to be squeezed, filled with terror and torment. As she lay there fading into darkness, Joseph remained unconscious and unaware of the misfortune that had followed his experience. Helen, seeing him there, let out a scream of pure mayhem and fell unconscious. A misfortune that life has exposed with the trail of natural events, the smell, the taste, the unshakable dread of life before death moment. As they both wheeled in pain, help faded into the land of dreams. Joe remembered seeing stars fill Joe's eyes. Then darkness came before the light filled the room, timeless like a dream, nightmares in the dark corners waiting for the opportunity to be dreamt. This would be known as the second near-death experience. Regrettably, this fate sealed Helen into a spiral of pain and misery, facing a disconnection to her family and life itself. As the medical report later read, Helen shows two sides of life. One still had hope, love, care. The other, bitter, dizzy, and foul, willing to rely on chance, gambling at the edge of life. Aggressive, impulsive, unpredictable, Helen has harmed herself and others. Maximum security required. As for Joe's faith, this was only the beginning.